And now we will take what Daniel and his team are doing at Byton to the next level, and we'll talk about mobility in all dimensions of our world.
Yes, because while some are revolutionizing the way we move on our streets, others are rethinking how new solutions can be applied to the sky and space. Therefore, ladies and gentlemen, please give a warm welcome to our next panel, which is the CEO and co-founder at Sharing OS, Michael Qian. The program manager of vans and drones at Daimler, Corinna Elosge. The CEO of Austria's hottest company for air and space, Robert Machtlinger from FACC. As well as a gentleman who is reaching for the stars as the CEO of Isar Aerospace Technologies, Daniel Metzler. And the session will be moderated by another very insightful lady who is not only the CEO of CLC Advisors, but also a NASA Datanaut, the fantastic Cindy Qian.
Yay! Afternoon. Hello, everybody. Thank you so much for coming. I'm Cindy Qian. You know who I am. I've been working with startups and in venture capital and technology, looking opportunities to bridge together with investors as well as entrepreneurs, and working in private and public partnerships, also with governments. And this region of Europe has been a region that I've been working with for 5 years. It's been quite a while. And I'm also a NASA Datanaut, which is a program out of the CIO's office. And David Meza, who you met earlier, manages the program at NASA headquarters. And we promote open source data and NASA's data sets and what you can do. It's a prosperity case. It's not a charity case, that you can build things. So David spoke a little bit about the data science and the architecture there earlier this morning. And today you met our wonderful panelists here, and we're going to talk about from the streets to the sky. So I'm really, really excited about this program, and I realize I just sat in the wrong street, but that's okay, because we'll work this way over. And I wanted to, I wanted to tell a really quick story and say thank you to Johannes Müller for asking me to come. When they were planning the first Darwin Circle conference, he was super excited. He asked me to come, and I couldn't do it because I was going back and forth between New York and Germany. I'm based in New York, but this time around, literally the day after Darwin Circle last year, he said, "Can you come?" And I was like, "Okay, you gave me a year." So that was really, Johannes, thank you. I know you're listening back there in the Darwin Circle group. And after some time in discussion, I just thought it would be a good idea to continue the theme of mobility that Darwin Circle did earlier this spring. And he gave me a choice of either talking about data science or about women or about artificial intelligence. I was like, no, mobility is where it is. That's where the fun and the sexy is in technology. So again, I'm joined by our panelists, and I wanted to start with Michael, because you're on the street level. Yes. With Sharing OS. Can you tell us about Sharing OS? And hand me the clicker too, because we can do that. I forgot to get that. So yeah, why don't you pass it over? Thank you. Teamwork. Oh, so when we talked about mobility, right, when I was growing up, that's what I thought we would be doing. Do you guys know this gentleman? Yes? Raise your hand if you know who he is. That's George Jetson, right? And it was a cartoon by Hanna-Barbera in the US. And we thought that there would be flying cars at the time. And really, since we are in Austria, obviously, and close to Germany, it's all about the family wagons, I'm sure, on the Autobahn that go, that drives the fastest. So the family wagon is really what the money's all about. But anyway, so Michael, when we move forward, that's what I thought we would be at in the 21st century, and now we're here, and we're not quite there yet, but these are the people that will show us how close we're going to get. And so, Michael, let's start on the ground, and you can talk about Sharing OS.
Thanks, Cindy. Sharing OS is a relatively young company. We started about 2 years ago. We're currently powering about 500,000 rides per month around the globe. as the name suggests, OS stands for operating system. So we want to become an operating system for companies who want to get into the sharing space, especially in mobility sharing. We have seen a huge demand in the last mile and the first mile mobility space, starting about 2 years ago, when Ofo and Mobike just started their operations in China. We look at the numbers, like when they release the bikes for bike sharing into the street, every bike is used around 20 times. So we found this is an amazing market, and we found this is going to solve a lot of problems the big cities around the world actually currently have, which is congestion and the pollutions. So SharingOS is providing the, when we start, we picked the European as our launch pad because we found that Europe has a lot of biking cultures, and we have very good historical city centers and small streets. So it's very, very good starting pad for bike sharing. And as a matter of fact, actually, bike sharing started in Germany about some 20 years ago in Leipzig by Nextbike. So we came to where it started with the new technology. When we started, we picked the city of Bristol in the UK. So maybe...
yeah, maybe if we can get the video started on this one. Thank you.
Bristol is a city about 400,000 population, and we launched with 700 bikes about 1 year ago, and in just 2 months' time, we got 10% of the city population to register our app, and people really love the service because I can see the smile after people use it. So this is proofs this bike sharing is also a very strong application that can be used in Europe and in the US. Bike sharing itself is actually the fastest user acquisition applications of all time. So that proves that the demand is very high. So we realized that when we try to run a good mobility sharing schemes, we have to work with very strong local partners to be in charge of the operations and the communications with the cities and the councils. So during our development, we started in France with Indigo Group. They are the world's largest car parking company with a strong presence in 750 cities in 16 countries. And they have lots of knowledge in mobilities. And they have like 20,000 employees in charge of operations. So working with them now, we already have bike sharing operations in 7 cities in France. We're the largest doctor's bike sharing. And now we're also testing the scooter sharing in that city, in the city of Toulouse, just starting from yesterday.
Oh, wow. It seems like host solutions are like the way to go. What is the biggest challenge or pain points facing the last mile of mobility?
When we talk about the last mile solution and the mobility sharing, I think it's very big challenge is people asking is if this business model is sustainable. People see that very, very few car sharing companies in the world is making money. For example, like Daimler and BMW just recently merged the car sharing units. I think one of the main reason is currently they are not profitable at the moment. So why is it not profitable? We think that first of all, the cost of manufacturing of those cars is not cheap, but that can be solved going forward. However, the key component of this operation is the operation cost. For example, in Madrid, there's an operation called eMove. They already got hundreds of thousands of users registered for their application for the car sharing. And each car is turned around for 3 to 5 times a day. But in the end of the day, that they have to use cranes to get the cars to depots to charge. So you can imagine how costly it is. So our solution is that we recognize that operation is very heavy in this space, but we try to find a charging solution for this, which we use a battery swapping system. So we designed a battery which is for the fleet, electrical fleet. It's not just, when we talk about fleet, it's not just e-cars, but it's also e-mopeds, e-bikes, and e-scooters, kick scooters. We realize that for different terrains, for different cities, for different countries, people love for different technologies. And if we can have one type of battery, which we designed for, we can use one battery in e-bike, 2 batteries in e-scooter, the moped, and we can use 6 batteries for the smaller e-cars. So by doing this, we can unify the batteries instead of having different size of batteries, which you need a lot of facilities for charging, for replacing. Coupled with this battery system, we have the vendor machine as well. That vendor machine we can install in the key positions in the cities that can be shared, can be used for the operation team to get to the battery and to replace the battery. Eventually, we are open to all the users to do that by themselves. Also to the other retail users for the vehicles, because that can reduce the pain of charging their current electrical vehicles. That's one of the major reasons why the electric vehicles is not taking off yet in Europe, especially the two-wheelers. So we are going to release this product line next month in Paris. I want to extend this invitation to all the audience to join us to see that in Paris on October 18th in the autonomy event.
Right, that's fantastic. It's up there if you don't know about it. Corinna, it's a great segue over to you. He was talking about vehicles and some of the things that you're doing at Daimler, some very special projects with light commercial vehicles. You want to tell the folks about it? And I wonder if the video will work, but we'll see. So.
Happy to. Yeah, I don't need to talk much about Daimler. I think every one of you knows what Daimler originally does. I think the really exciting thing is a department which was founded about 2 years ago. This department is called Future Transportation, and within that department we have all kind of freedom to operate on all different kind of solutions, either with regard to the mobility of people or the transportation of goods. For example, ride pooling, ride sharing, for example, Via Van is located at that department. And we also look into different solutions for the last mile. One of the focus areas is autonomous delivery on the last mile. And one of the topics would be, for example, vans and drones. So we combine our classical vehicles, light commercial vehicles, and combine them with drones. And usually the first question that I always hear, okay, why does Daimler invest into drones? And I think the answer is quite easy. We sell mobility and we sell vehicles on the one hand, but of course we now look into all different kind of further options to become a real mobility provider, to enlarge our current portfolio, and for example, drones would be a wonderful option to do that.
Fantastic. And what does the industry need in order for this venture to scale?
Oh, that's really difficult to say. I think we are quite fine with the technology perspective. We are confident that we can develop that further. However, of course, especially in terms of flying drones, flying transport drones, we of course need a drone-friendly regulation that then allows for such, in the end, autonomous flights. And of course, on top of that, we need some kind of airspace management system that then orchestrates all the drones that are in the sky. Who is allowed to fly where and when? So this kind of system needs to develop. We already see quite an amount of stakeholders engaging in all these topics, but we still have steps to go.
So Robert, I know you're going to have something to say about the stakeholders and regulations. We were talking about it in the back with this. You know, she's dealing with products. You're dealing with people. So what do you think? What is the regulation in that regard, that in your opinion, in order to scale your ventures?
Well, I think in aerospace, definitely, aerospace by itself will grow in mobility. We all know. Aerospace traffic doubles every 15 years. That's the good thing. There is 40,000 new airplanes needed in the next 20 years. That's good for the overall business, and that's good for bringing people together in the environment of globalization. I think, as said before, there is a new mean of transportation coming on the horizon. That's definitely urban mobility and autonomous flying. And if you just look into the development of this technology in the last 5 years, the ramp-up of programs launched in that field is tremendous. So in 2012, there was around about 12 projects launched worldwide. Last year it was 100. So there is a big push in that industry. There is forecasts that in the middle of the next decade, the volume of urban mobility will be 20 billion US dollar a year.
Say that again. What is that number again?
That's pretty much in the middle of the next decade, so around 2025, 2027.
Wow.
The business of urban mobility will be 20 billion, 22 billion a year.
20 billion to
and I think the
billion.
big handicap today is not the flying vehicle. The vehicles, there is an early stage of being, let's say, ready. They can fly. There is tests ongoing, a little bit here, a little bit there. And definitely the big issue is connectivity between the vehicles, which is technically possible already today. There's certainly a second element, which is communication, because we also need to communicate with the manned aerospace, the big aerospace, and there is certainly regulation. So we need to find regulatory approaches to keep those airplanes in the air and make transportation affordable. So I think that's another thing. Urban mobility must be affordable. Urban mobility cannot be as expensive as using helicopters, because then we would have it already. That's by far too expensive. Urban mobility, if we talk about moving people from A to B, mainly in large cities, needs to be comparable cost-wise to like driving a taxi. And I think this is where we are currently investigating as a company. What can we do? What can we enable to make this kind of technology available to the public in the next 10 years? So it's very interesting, however, very challenging, not so much from a technical standpoint, but a little bit more challenging from a regulatory standpoint on how to incorporate this additional transportation means into the today's environment.
Where do you look for, where do you look in order to find the innovations in aerospace when you're up in the sky and making, you know, the next and the new round? Because you're developing that in your research. Where do you look? What's your source? Where do you think?
Well, if we right now talk, and I think the majority business in aerospace will be the big transportation airplanes. That's definitely the majority of the business. That's a couple of hundred billion a year. I think the big challenge here is, again, making airplanes more economical, making them more user-friendly. One example, the CO2 emission in aerospace worldwide is 2% of the total CO2 emission. If we want to double aerospace travel in the next 15 years, and this will happen definitely, the CO2 emission target is bring it down to 1%. So doubling the people we move with large airplanes, but reducing the amount of emission significantly. So that's the objective. This can be done by aerodynamics. This can be done by lightweight structures. This is what we are doing as a company. And this will be done definitely by better performing engines. Better performing engines, and we have good examples today. The last two platforms being brought to the market is the Boeing 787 Dreamliner, and on the other hand, the Airbus A350. Those two airplanes burn 25% less fuel than their previous generation airplanes. And looking a little bit ahead, there is development ongoing with engine manufacturers having an electrical turbine being ready for use between 2025 and 2030. What does that mean? Instead of running a turbine, normally two turbines on the airplane, we will run two engines pretty much in a hybrid environment that we have a system generating electrical power with synthetic fuel, and this electrical power will drive the engines. We probably will have first applications, 100-seat airplanes flying on a mission of 1 to 2 hours made available to the market in the next 10 years.
That's really awesome. And it was at the point about CO2, I think is really relevant because there's a lot of splash on what SpaceX is doing in their BFR. And I think the conversation is so early on that the CO2 is an issue in the engines. And I'm sure they're thinking about it, but until that is solved, it really is going to impact the industry at that level as well, you know, all the way over to the planes. Which brings us to you, Daniel. You know, actually it brings us to where we are. I always like to put a picture of where this is. This is where we're sitting right now. It's Vienna, and it's actually, this photograph was released this week on September 4th, actually the beginning of the month, and it's Copernicus data from the Sentinel-2A satellite from Isar. And so, you know, I always like to make sure that we get a sky-eye view on seeing, you know, our planet and our atmosphere and our climate to make sure that we can preserve that, even though it may not be a popular sentiment in some parts of the world as well. But that brings us to you, Daniel, and what you're doing with jet propulsion. And tell us more about Isar.
So space technology is not about enabling Earth observation, for example, but also, speaking about the previous topics, connecting all of the Earth-based systems. So, for example, when you want to do precision farming, for example, when you want to coordinate autonomous driving vehicles, you can then also, in the future, rely on satellite data and real-time satellite data. So there's many satellite constellations currently under development and also under testing, where you have real global coverage of your satellites, so you're connected at any place in the world, anytime. And with Isar Aerospace, we're working towards bringing these, in the future, small satellites into Earth orbits. So a satellite is nothing less than just electronics and sensors. And electronics, as we all know, are getting better. And so the satellites are getting lighter. And we're working towards smaller launch vehicles to provide a more convenient way of placing these small satellites into Earth orbit. So you don't have to run your satellite as a piggyback payload into Earth orbits, but you can also do a mission on your own and just maybe fill up a launch vehicle with about 200 kilograms of payload or 500 kilograms of payload instead of 20 tons as previously.
I was having a conversation with Isa yesterday on space debris, and there is currently 28,000 objects out there that could be dangerous, and it's certainly in orbit that could be threats. And it seems like weekly they're getting notifications and alerts that this is, you got to move the trajectory of the satellites. The space agencies are getting that. How are we going to tackle that problem, right? We've got CO2, we've got regulations, then we got space debris where you are. How are we going to tackle that?
So space debris obviously is a topic every time. Americans are tracking all of the space debris parts that are, I guess, larger than a centimeter. So we know exactly what parts are up there in the orbits, and where sometimes we need to do special mission changes. Also, for example, with the International Space Station, so we don't hit that debris. Right. For example, the new CubeSats. They're destined just to fly on Earth orbits that naturally decay. Right. So, for example, after 5 to 10 to 15 years, they naturally fall down with a rest in the atmosphere, and they just decelerate and then burn in the atmosphere.
I know the possibility of space lasers zapping that over so that it bounces into the atmosphere and comes down and burns out.
Exactly. So it's a combination. On one hand, the satellites can go down into the atmosphere naturally. On the other hand, with larger satellites, for example, we can target them and really bring them down with other satellites. So we shoot up another satellite, and then bring down both satellites. So we make space again, for example, for telecommunication satellites, for TV satellites that really need the space up there.
Okay. I have a final question that I want to ask all of you, and it's, what is the moonshot that you want to see in your individual mobility spaces that you in what you're trying to tackle and the problems you're trying to solve? Anyone? Robert.
Thank you. Well, I think sometimes it's very hard to imagine what will be in 10, 15 years. If I look back when I started to think and understand what mobility means, so 40 years ago, traveling was completely different. So taking an airplane and going somewhere, even in Austria 40 years ago, was not normal. So you did it maybe once, and not everyone could do it. 40 years later, we use airplanes pretty much like 40 years ago cars, pretty much. And if I would look ahead, and let's say 2030, if urban mobility with air taxis, like Daimler might build them, or other ones, could be a perfect new experience in traveling point to point very fast and predictable, because today if you stay in Paris, if you go into London, if you visit Shanghai or Beijing or Los Angeles, traveling inside the city is not predictable. It can take you 10 minutes, it can take you 3 hours to be there. And I think if we could harmonize mobility on the streets, on rails, in larger airplanes, in combination with urban mobility and a certain amount of electrical driven, also larger airplanes, that would be a good step forward in the next decade and grooming the ground for 2050 probably. So I think that would be a good target and would be a nice thing to have. Fantastic. Before we beam each other from here to there.
Yeah. Anybody else want to jump in? No?
Yeah, I think my vision from transporting people, at least within the next 10 years, is that it will be a seamless travel for everyone, which fits exactly to the needs you have. And that also is true for the transportation of goods. So certainly the drones, for example, will not be the solution for the transportation of all different kind of products. But thinking about the transportation of lab samples or blood products, it might be the right option. And I think what we will see in the future, and I think it's not 10 years ahead, it's maybe 2 or 3 or 5 years ahead, is that you can choose whatever you would like to. You have different kind of models, to have different kind of solutions, and you choose whatever fits best to the needs you have, and I think that's awesome.
I'm so sad that the video didn't work, because it's just so beautiful, the renditions in both of your videos, all your videos that you brought in, and it's just really that you can really imagine being there, and it's wonderfully produced and whatnot, but you can really see it happening as well. Michael?
For me, it is to provide the ultimate safety for the riders. So currently, we can see that even with kick scooter sharing, people perceive it to be dangerous, but they have the same similar fatality rate as a car riding. Given that the streets are designed for cars specifically, this is a rate that is good. But still, there's people dying for taking the sharing, because they don't prepare for the helmets, they don't prepare for anything that's like they own a bike or own a scooter. So I think that that's what our target is, not just to provide the convenience, but also to provide the ultimate safety for people who enjoy this ridership with the last mile solutions.
Right, you're just like David. That's exactly what he said in the back there. And what about you? I want to show us like what deep space looks like, what you're going to do.
I guess the challenge in the space industry is really to bring down the cost for space access, to make space access more convenient, also for smaller and newer companies, so that they don't have to wait 2.5 years to get their launch into space. So on the previous image, we saw a metal 3D printed rocket engine, one of our first prototypes, and that's also one thing we're doing at Isar Aerospace. We try to bring down the development times and also development costs by by counting on new manufacturing technologies such as 3D printing, where we can take, for example, classical manufacturing times from about 9 months down to about 2 weeks.
Wow.
For special parts for the rocket engine, such as the combustion chamber here.
Wow, that's pretty awesome. Finally, I wanted to share NASA's Deep Space Gateway, and it has open opportunities, because this is where we're really going in the direction. All of you are building blocks to this, which brings us over to InSight. Why does this video work and the other ones don't? But this is Mars InSight, which is going to be landing in Mars on Thanksgiving Day, in the Thanksgiving Day for US in November, but it's on its way right now over to there and to look at the terrain, and you can imagine your technology and possibly your technology, and then definitely you, and then your safety as well, and making sure that the equipment gets there, and maybe someday people and the surface of Mars as well. Right now we have Curiosity and machines, so you can really see all that. And lastly, where JPL and NASA think that we're the likelihood of where we're going to find signs of life is in the moons of Jupiter. And the two in the middle are the ones that they think is the most accurate. So I threw in some space there, because space is always fun. But so this is the future. My last question, as we look from Jupiter back to Mars, to Earth, and then Venus over there, towards the sun, what's your favorite mode of transportation?
Never been on a rocket before.
Okay, that's your favorite? Okay.
At least to watch, yeah.
To watch. All right. So are you going to be like Dream Moon guy? You know, the guy who's going to go up in space? I think that's pretty cool, with an artist, a painter, a poet, architect, dancer.
Well, it's definitely interesting to see what the artists are coming up with.
Yeah.
I guess it's exciting for all of humanity, so that actually humans are going back to, at least towards the moon, not on the moon, but towards the moon.
Right.
And let's see what they come up with.
Yeah. Robert.
Well, I think I'm representing aerospace. So
Okay. You want the supersonic jet.
absolutely.
Yeah. We all need
as
that.
fast as possible, and as
I think you got a couple of fans up here. They agree with you. They're peanut gallery.
and as green as possible. So
Yeah, absolutely.
I must say, I just returned from IAA last week, because IAA commercial vehicles took place in Hanover last week, and we presented our new Sprinter, which is already with the whole MBUX thing installed.
Yeah.
And I was really impressed to have that in a commercial vehicle. So at least for the time being, for September, October, this will be my favorite mode of transportation.
It looks very sexy, by the way. I saw the video. And Michael.
For me, it's the kick scooter. Every time
The kick scooter!
Yeah, every time you take the kick scooter, you can see that the children's electrical one. The children's chasing you, the dogs is barking. It's a lot of fun. The people get attention on you. That's my favorite.
I know, it's lower to the ground and whatnot, yeah. All right. Thank you so much, you guys, for doing this. And it's been a wonderful pleasure to get to know you and talk to you, et cetera. And there will be around for any questions if anybody wants to meet up to them. And as well, I brought some NASA stickers. If anybody wants NASA stickers, I have a whole bunch. So come and say hi. You have to say hello, and you have to speak to the panelists too. And then I'll give you a token where you talked about blockchain. This is a paper token of exchange and sharing of knowledge, and et cetera. So thank you so much to all of you.
Thank you as well.
thank you so much.
Thank you so much, guys. Really, really interesting. Awesome stuff. Yeah. Now the pictures in the... Very good.